Welcome to the Defense and Aerospace Report. I'm Vago Muradian at the 8th Halifax International Security Forum in Nova Scotia, Canada, and we have with us the CEO of the world's top polling firm, Ipsos Public Affairs, Darrell Bricker. Darrell, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Last night at the lobster dinner, you and I ended up talking a little bit about the results from this election, and you went off into a fascinating description of what happened from your standpoint as a professional in this business. From your standpoint, what happened? What did polling get wrong? What did polling get right? And what did it really tell us that we missed?
Okay, so a couple of things. People treat polling like it's this very precise thing that we do, like we're, for example, firing a target rifle in a confined range with a big scope on it. It's very precise. Actually, polling is more like trap shooting. You're trying to track a target moving through the air with a shotgun, and you're just trying to hit it at exactly the precise time. That spread of shot that you're firing out is your margin of error. If you hit it with one of the BBs, you've done a good job. So as it traveled through the air, we just kind of winged it on the issue of popular vote. Hillary Clinton's probably going to get somewhere between 1.5% and 2% of popular vote. Our last poll had her at 3%. Most of the polls had her around that level, so they got that right. What they missed was a very precise change in public opinion that happened in just a couple of states. And it's a very minor number of votes overall, but it was critical in terms of determining what was going to happen in the Electoral College.
So how many votes were there? Because you said, he didn't just, last night the analogy you used, he didn't just wing the pigeon, he split the atom, is what you said.
That's exactly what I said. He did split the atom, and he had exactly the right impact with precisely the amount of votes that he needed to just marginally win in a few key Rust Belt states that the polls weren't predicting that he was going to win to the degree that he did.
So if you were, how many votes were you talking about? Is it hundreds of thousands of votes, tens of thousands of votes?
I've seen estimates ranging from 75,000 to 150,000. So when you look at the overall, a number of votes, which is like something like 60 million, that's a very, very small number of votes that were important to determine the outcome of the election.
From what do you think are the lessons that pollsters have learned from this endeavor?
Well, we learn something from every election. I mean, the biggest issue that we deal with these days, and it's not just in the United States, we've also dealt with it in places like Spain, Colombia, Canada, the UK during the Brexit vote. It's really this question of turnout. Both estimating the overall amount of turnout, and it looks like the U.S. turnout is going to be a little bit lower than it's been traditionally in this century, but also differential turnout, the level of enthusiasm, even a marginal level of enthusiasm more or less for one party. And if we would have been able to peg that, the actual turnout and the level of enthusiasm for each of the parties' support, we would have come closer. But that's something that our instruments right now are not doing a great job of, and the evidence of it is the misses that we've had.
You guys every year in conjunction with this conference do a global survey of defense, foreign policy trends. What did this year's report find?
Well, what it shows is that on the big issues of foreign policy, there really hasn't been much of a change over the space of the last year. So you'd sit back and say, well, it sure feels like the world is changing. But the reason for that is because most of this change is being driven by what's happening domestically, what's happening in individual countries. The one issue that kind of stands out as a big issue for people in terms of foreign policy is immigration. And that's really affecting how a lot of particularly European states and the United States feel about their interrelationships with the rest of the world. The big thing that we're seeing, though, is this general sense of decline that's set in. Over 60% of people in the world today believe that society is broken, that our best days are behind us, that the world is on the wrong track and their country is on the wrong track. High numbers in the United States believe this. So what you're seeing happening in things like the U.S. election is the effect of that. And it's this sense of social progress that's being lost in places like, for example, the Rust Belt in the United States. So I think that what's really interesting here is not what our global indicators are showing in terms of foreign policy, but how domestic policy seems to be separated from that. But you wonder if that's going to last, if it's going to find a way to, for example, leak into something like trade, which it hasn't yet, but the potential is there.
What's your prescription for countering that? Is it messaging? What is it that will address that concern? Or is it actually at base addressing people's fundamental concerns?
Well, I think that there's a need to reconnect between expertise and people who care about these sorts of things with what regular people are thinking. I mean, we're here in the rarefied era of the Halifax Security Forum. It's not like people are talking in a language or about issues that anybody in the streets of America are really focused on today, other than the fact that Donald Trump was elected. So the question is, how do you relate this back to what's happening in people's everyday lives? But like Tolstoy and Anna Karenina talked about, happy families are all happy in the same way. Unhappy families are all unhappy in their own way. And so it would be too much to ascribe what is happening in the world to individual specific outcomes in individual countries in exactly the same way. So if you go to a place like Latin America, it's about corruption and political elites being out of touch with the public because they are corrupt. If you go to the United States, it's about nativism, and it's about a belief that the system is broken. It no longer represents the views of the people. If you go to Europe, it's about a combination of nativism, the decline of the state as being able to support the social welfare expectations that the public has, and this overall sense that the youth of the future aren't going to do as well. So that while there's an overall, it all adds up into an overall sense of decline and that the world is not on the right track, it's different things in different places.
Darrell, thanks very much.
My pleasure.